There was a time when I could not remember the last thing I did just for myself. Not because I did not want to, but because I forgot I was allowed to. That realization came to me one evening, standing alone in our bedroom, holding a dress I had not worn in years. It no longer felt like mine. It felt like it belonged to someone I used to be. I remember touching the fabric and wondering when I had disappeared from my own life. My husband was in the other room, watching television. The sound was low, steady, comfortable. He did not notice I was gone from the room. He did not ask where I was. And in that silence, I understood something painful. I had given up everything for our marriage, and somewhere along the way, he forgot who I was. I did not blame him at first. I blamed time. I blamed responsibility. I blamed life. But deep down, I knew the truth was heavier than that. I had slowly folded myself into the background. I had made space for everyone else. And no one noticed the cost. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed and asked myself a question I had avoided for years. If I disappeared tomorrow, who would notice the woman I used to be? The answer frightened me, because I was not sure my husband would. When my husband and I first married, I was full of plans. Not big dreams, just personal ones. I loved reading. I loved learning new things. I loved the quiet pride of doing something well. Back then, he admired that about me. He used to say, "You're strong." I believed him. Our life together started simply. Small home, limited money, big hopes. When challenges came, I stepped forward without hesitation. I told myself this was what love looked like. When he needed support, I gave it. When his job demanded more time, I adjusted. When life became busy, I made myself flexible. At first, none of it felt like loss. It felt like partnership. But partnership slowly turned into expectation. I stopped reading because the house needed attention. I stopped exploring interests because there was no time. I stopped talking about myself because there was always something more important. I did not announce these changes. I just made them quietly. My husband grew comfortable, not careless, just unaware. He trusted that everything would be handled. And it was. By me. I became the one who remembered everything. Dates, bills, family matters, emotional balance, that I carried the invisible weight of our life together. And I told myself that was love. As the years passed, people praised my husband for his dedication, for his hard work, for providing. I agreed with them. What I did not say was how much of myself I had set aside to make that life possible. Not because I wanted recognition, but because I wanted to feel real. At home, I moved through routines smoothly. Cooking, cleaning, listening. I smiled when needed, stayed calm when things were difficult. I rarely complained. And slowly, my husband stopped asking. He stopped asking how I felt. Stopped asking what I wanted. Not because he was cruel, but because I never reminded him I existed beyond my role. There were moments when I caught my reflection and did not recognize the woman looking back. She looked tired, not just in her eyes, but in her posture. She had learned how to shrink. And I realized something quietly heartbreaking. I had not only given up my dreams, I had given up my identity. And my husband did not notice. This sets the emotional foundation. When you're ready, say continue, and I will write part 2, Rising Conflict, where the small moments of neglect and misunderstanding slowly deepen, exactly paced for narration and retention. You're building something powerful here. The changes did not come suddenly. They arrived quietly, like dust settling on furniture you stop noticing. At first, I told myself nothing was wrong. This was just marriage. This was just life moving forward. My husband still came home every night. We still shared meals. We still spoke about practical things. But somewhere along the way, we stopped speaking about me. I stopped being a person with thoughts and needs. I became a role. The wife. The support. The constant. I noticed it in small moments. When he talked about his day, I listened carefully. When I shared something about mine, his attention drifted. I would pause mid-sentence sometimes, just to see if he noticed. Most of the time, he didn't. That silence was louder than words. I remember one afternoon clearly. The house was quiet, and sunlight came through the window softly. I had just finished cleaning. My back ached, but I ignored it. When my husband came home, I smiled and asked, "How was your day?" He answered quickly, then sat down and turned on the television.
He did not ask about mine.
I stood there for a moment longer than necessary, waiting. Nothing came. I walked into the kitchen and felt something tighten inside my chest. It wasn't anger. It was disappointment. Because I realized I had become invisible. There were times when I tried to reconnect. Small gestures. Careful ones. I cooked his favorite meals. I planned quiet evenings. I tried to talk gently. Sometimes he responded. Sometimes he seemed distracted. Each time he didn't notice, I told myself not to take it personally. He's tired.
He's stressed.
He doesn't mean it. I became very good at protecting him from blame. But no one was protecting me. I started noticing how much I adjusted. If he was busy, I waited. If he was tired, I stayed quiet. If he was distracted, I made myself smaller. I stopped asking for time. Stopped asking for attention. I convinced myself that love meant patience. But patience without balance slowly becomes loneliness. At family gatherings, people praised my husband. He works so hard, they said. He's so dedicated. I agreed. I smiled. No one mentioned the woman standing beside him, the one who made everything else possible. My husband never corrected them. Not once. That hurt more than I expected. Not because I wanted praise, but because I wanted acknowledgement. At night, lying beside him, I stared at the ceiling. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one with opinions, the one with dreams, the one who laughed freely. I wondered when she left, and why no one noticed. There was one moment that stayed with me. We were sitting together, quietly. I said, "Do you ever miss how we used to talk?" He looked surprised. "What do you mean?" he asked. "Nothing," I replied, because explaining felt too heavy. I realized then how far we had drifted. Not away from each other, but away from me. And I did not know how to find my way back. The moment that finally opened my eyes did not come with shouting or tears. It came quietly, on a day that looked ordinary from the outside. That morning, I woke up feeling tired in a way sleep could not fix. Not the kind of tired that comes from work, the kind that settles deep in your chest. I moved through the house slowly, made breakfast, straightened the kitchen. My husband came in, already dressed, already focused on his phone.
"Good morning," I said.
"Morning," he replied, without looking up. I watched him for a moment longer than usual. I noticed how used to this we had become. I took a breath and said something I had not said in a long time. I was thinking maybe we could spend some time together this weekend. He paused. Not long. "Let's see," he said. "I've got a lot going on." Those words settled between us. "Let's see." They sounded reasonable. They always do. But to me, they sounded like something else. They sounded like delay. Like distance. Like me once again being placed second, and I nodded and said nothing more. All day, that conversation replayed in my mind. I told myself I was being sensitive. But deep inside, I knew I was asking for something very small.
Time.
Attention. Presence. That evening, I cooked dinner carefully. Not because I expected anything special, but because habits are hard to break. I set the table for two. When my husband came home, he walked past it without stopping. "I'm heading out," he said. Something came up. I felt the room tilt slightly. "Oh," I said. That was all I could manage. He kissed my cheek quickly, already halfway out the door. "I won't be long." The door closed. I stood there alone. I sat at the table and stared at the empty chair across from me. The food cooled slowly. I did not cry right away. I just sat there, feeling something settle into place. This wasn't new. This wasn't sudden. This was the result of years of choosing others over myself. Years of being convenient. In that moment, I understood something painful. My husband did not forget me all at once. He forgot me slowly. because I let him. That night, I cleaned the kitchen quietly. Every sound felt louder than usual. When I went to bed, the room felt too big. When he came home later, I pretended to be asleep. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because I had nothing left to say. I stared into the darkness and asked myself a question I had avoided for years. Who am I if I stop being everything for everyone else? The answer scared me, because I didn't know. The next day, something inside me felt different. Not angry, not broken, just clear. I watched my husband move through his routine.
Coffee. Shoes. Keys.
He smiled at me absent-mindedly. I realized then how little of me he actually saw. And I understood something else. If I didn't speak now, I never would. That evening, I asked him to sit with me. He looked surprised, but he sat. "What's wrong?" he asked. I took a breath. "I feel like I disappeared," I said quietly. He frowned. "What do you mean?" "I gave up things I loved," I continued. "I gave up parts of myself." He shifted in his seat. "I never asked you to," he said. Those words hit harder than anything else. Because he was right, he didn't ask. I offered.
And
that was the problem. "I know," I replied. "But I thought that's what love meant." He was silent. "I don't know who I am anymore," I said.
he sighed.
"You're overthinking," he said. "We're fine." That was the moment something broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough for me to finally stop hoping. I nodded. And in that nod, I let go of something I had been holding onto for years. The belief that if I gave enough, I would be seen. That night, I did not cry. I felt strangely calm. Because sometimes clarity feels like peace. After that night, nothing outside changed right away. The house was the same. The walls were the same. The morning still came with light through the curtains. But something inside me had shifted. I stopped waiting. Not in an angry way. Not with bitterness. Just, I stopped holding my breath. I still woke up early. I still made tea. I still folded clothes and wiped the kitchen counter. But I did these things for myself now, not as proof of love. For the first time in years, I sat down without feeling guilty. I remember sitting at the small table by the window, holding my cup with both hands. The tea had gone cold, but I did not rush to reheat it. I watched the steam disappear and thought, this is how parts of me faded too. Quietly. My husband noticed the change before I spoke it. He would look at me longer than usual. Sometimes he opened his mouth, then closed it again. Other times he asked simple questions. "Are you tired? Did I say something wrong?" I always smiled and said, "No, I'm fine." And I was not lying. I had stopped expecting him to see me the way I once hoped. That acceptance brought a strange peace. One evening, he came home earlier than usual. He sat across from me at the table, his hands folded, his shoulders heavy. "You don't talk much anymore," he said. I nodded slowly. "There's nothing left I need to explain." He frowned. "That sounds like giving up." I looked at him then. Really looked. The man I had built my life around. The man I had defended, supported, waited for. "No," I said softly. "It sounds like understanding." Silence filled the space between us. Not angry silence. Just truth sitting where words used to be. A few days later, my daughter-in-law asked if I wanted help in the kitchen. That had never happened before. I looked at her, surprised. She seemed unsure, almost nervous. "If you want," she added quickly. I nodded. "Thank you." We worked side by side without much talking. The sound of chopping vegetables felt loud in the quiet room. After a while, she said, "I didn't know you felt so alone." I paused. "I didn't either," I replied. She swallowed. "I thought you were strong. Like nothing bothered you." I gave a small smile. Being quiet doesn't mean being unbreakable. She nodded slowly. That moment didn't fix everything, but it softened something between us. That was enough. I learned something important during that time. People often don't forget us on purpose. They forget because we teach them that we will always be there no matter what. I had made myself invisible by never asking to be seen. So, I began doing small things differently. I started going for short walks alone in the evening. I joined a local reading group once a week. I called an old friend I had not spoken to in years. The first time I laughed out loud with her on the phone, I cried afterward. Not because of sadness, but because I remembered the sound of my own joy. My husband watched these changes quietly. One night, as we were getting ready for bed, he said, "You seem lighter." I tied my hair back and looked at my reflection. Maybe I put some weight down. He sat on the edge of the bed. "I didn't know I was hurting you." I turned toward him slowly. "I know. That was not an accusation. It was a release. I spent years hoping you would notice," I continued. "And you spent years thinking everything was fine." He lowered his head. "I don't know how to fix that." I sat beside him. Sometimes things don't need fixing. They need accepting. We did not hug. We did not cry together. We simply sat. And that was honest. From then on, our relationship became quieter. Less expectation. Less disappointment. And strangely more respect. He began asking my opinion again. Not out of guilt, but curiosity. He thanked me more often. Not because I demanded it, but because I stopped giving without limit. I realized something else too. Love does not disappear all at once. It fades when one person keeps pouring while the other only drinks. I had refilled my own cup, and that changed everything. I no longer needed to be remembered to feel real. I remembered myself. Some mornings I still feel the ache. Old habits don't vanish overnight. But now, when I feel unseen, I don't shrink. I stand gently taller. I don't raise my voice. I don't accuse. I simply choose myself. And that choice feels like coming home. Now, when I look back on those years, I don't feel anger. I feel understanding. I understand the woman I was. The one who believed love meant giving until there was nothing left. The one who thought being needed was the same as being valued. She did her best with what she knew. I don't blame my husband the way I once thought I might. He did not wake up one day and decide to forget me. He simply grew used to my silence, my patience, my endless yes. And I allowed it. There is a quiet kind of pain that comes from being dependable. People lean on you so long, they forget you can feel the
Wait.
I know that now. These days, I move slower. I listen more closely to my own thoughts. When something hurts, I don't hide it behind a smile. I speak softly, but I speak. Sometimes I sit alone in the early morning light, holding my tea the way I used to. But now I notice the warmth. I let it reach my hands before it fades. My husband and I still share a home. We still share meals. But we also share something new, awareness. Not perfection. Not grand apologies. Just honesty. And that is enough for me. I have learned that love should not erase you. It should not make you smaller, so others can feel bigger. Real love notices. Real love listens. If you are someone who gives quietly, if you feel forgotten, even while standing in the middle of your own life, please hear this. You do not need to disappear to keep the peace. You do not need to sacrifice your voice to prove your worth. You matter, even when you are tired, even when you stop explaining, even when you choose yourself. I gave up many things in my life.
Dreams. Time.
Parts of who I was. But I did not lose myself. I found her again. In silence. In stillness. In the moment I stopped waiting to be remembered. And that is where my peace began.